All right, welcome to HBCU Sports Podcast. I am senior editor Kendrick Marshall, joined by some special guests tonight, HBCU Sports contributor Chris Stevens and Jarrett Hoffman. Now, fellas, this was the first full weekend of Black college football across all divisions. Had a bunch of games, bunch of exciting finishes. Had a really big game on Sunday. Actually, two games on Sunday. Actually, the Orange Blossom Classic, and then the Red Tails Classic. One game was a dud. The other one was a fantastic finish. But we're going to start off tonight's show with like a couple of major developments. First, Division II schools, they had their way with their FCS brothers. You had Delaware State drop one to Bowie State. Then you had Virginia State go on the road and beat Norfolk State. And then you had Central State beat Mississippi Valley State in Chicago. I mean, fellas, like the Division II schools, they showed out this weekend against supposed to be bigger and better talent. Starting with you, Chris, what do you think about the developments that happened over the weekend?
To be honest with you, there's been some rumbling about the gap between HBCU D2 and HBCU D1 closing, and I think it is probably closing even further. Closing even smaller, after this weekend. You have to give Central State coach Kevin Porter a lot of credit because there was a point in that Central State Mississippi Valley State game where they were behind 13-7. I think they did it. I don't know. I can't remember if it was a double reverse or a halfback pass or something for a touchdown. Got called back for a penalty. That would kill most other schools, but those guys just said, "Okay, never mind. Line it back up. Let's do something else." And they ended up beating Valley. And I don't know what that says for Valley, but I tell you that it says that Central State seems like they're finally coming out of the doldrums a little bit. As far as Virginia State, Norfolk State, I predicted Virginia State to win that game because I just felt like Virginia State was the better team coming in, considering how bad Norfolk State played last year. Of course, Norfolk State is still playing bad. And, oh, boy. I was at Delaware. I had the misfortune of being at Bowie State, Delaware State this past weekend. And Bowie State deserves a ton of credit. Kyle Jackson has those guys, following in, his game plan, his footsteps. Their defense is still very phenomenal, led by Uvel Paul Jr. at the linebacker position. Their quarterback, Amir Jenkins, you're going to hear a lot from him. 6'3", 220, redshirt sophomore from Baltimore, Maryland. 18 of 25, 247 yards, no picks in his college debut against a Division I defense. When your quarterback can perform like that in his very first start against a Division I defense, that says a lot about the recruiting and the talent that Bowie State has. So that gap is shrinking. Whether it means that any of those schools could move up and join the MEAC, that's still a topic for another day. But the gap is closing. It absolutely is closing.
Cool. Jarrett, your Bowie State Bulldogs beat Delaware State. You were happy about that. In a really important season for them, I would say, for Bowie State. What did you make of not only that game, but the other two Division II schools having their way this weekend?
Well, I'll save the best for last, obviously. But Central State, I talked to their coach, Kevin Porter, a couple of years ago. Well, actually last year, prior to last season, his first season with the team. And he said he was there to win. He's not there to just, be there and just, pat guys on the back and just go out there and compete. No, he's out there to win. And they showed that against Mississippi Valley State. I think that's going to add some intrigue in the SIAC. I didn't really get a chance to catch much of that game, but I was score watching, and I just saw how much that they were improving. That I see how they're improving under Coach Porter. Norfolk State and Virginia State. Virginia State is talented. It doesn't matter who's on that field. They're going to have a great running back. And they put out a guy that you're going to hear about. You're going to remember his name. He Upton Bailey, he showed up and showed out against Norfolk State. Norfolk State, made it competitive. They opened up their playbook a lot in that game, but Virginia State was just ready. And that finish, man, that we had some incredible finishes this weekend. that might have been the most unbelievable finish that I may have ever seen, where Virginia State looked like it. They looked like they had threw the game away, and the game was about to go to overtime when, God bless them, the quarterback, was supposed to run around and just run out the clock, similar to, if people remember when the Ravens and the 49ers were in the Super Bowl, when they got the punt and they were just supposed to the punter just went back and to hold out the clock and then went out of bounds. He was supposed to do that, wait for the clock to hit zeros and then go out of bounds, but he went out of bounds with 1 second on the clock. And then Norfolk State had a chance to kick a field goal. And then the snap goes over the kicker, and they return it for a touch. That was the most incredible finish I have ever seen. And Virginia State deserved to win that game. They played such an incredible game. Now to the main event, my Bowie State Bulldogs. Two things are never going to change about Bowie State. One, we're always going to have a great quarterback. We had Amir Jenkins, we've had Jerome Johnson, we've had Deion Galat, and now we got Amir Jenkins. He looks like that next great Bowie State quarterback. I fully expect him to be a candidate for the CIAA Offensive Player of the Year. Not sure if he'll get it because there's a running back in Virginia Union that's looking like he's going to be on a tear once again this season, but I expect him to be definitely all conference watch. He is a very good quarterback. And another thing is our defense is always going to be sharp. The biggest reason we won this game was the battle on the line of scrimmage. Uvel Paul, he is going to get some NFL draft consideration. He asserted himself in this game, and he was tough to deal with. 4 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. He was dominant. And if they play like this all season, I don't see why Bowie State cannot get back to the CIAA championship and get back to that winning culture that we have set in the years of Damon Wilson.
Now, this game, the Bowie State, Delaware State game, that struck a nerve with Chris. He thinks it's a microcosm, not only of that game, but just the Delaware State program in general. And I'm going to give Chris all the time he needs to explain why he thinks this game and this program isn't quite where it needs to be right now.
Well, thank you, Pastor Marshall, for introducing me as the guest preacher this Monday evening. Hallelujah. Praises all be to God. Seriously. There's been a lot of complaining since the game, since the final gun went off on Saturday. And I'm going to be honest with y'all. As a Delaware State alum, as a journalist, I have to put all biases and partiality to the side, while I'm covering games. But now I'm off the game clock. So now I can talk about the complaints that are being lodged by alumni, former players, current students, so on and so forth. This goes back probably 15 years. Back in the middle of the middle 2000s, we had a president named Alan Sessoms who was probably the worst president Delaware State University's ever had. Like, this was a man who once said that the DSU band couldn't play Lift Every Voice and Sing before every game because there was no need for a black national anthem because there's no black nation. This is an HBCU president saying this, mind you. I hear y'all laughing, but yeah, this is hand to God. I mean, like, as my grandmother used to say, if I'm lying, may God snatch the breath out of my body. This is what this man said. But his biggest, I'll say his biggest villainous act was giving someone the bright idea to put an equestrian team at an HBCU. Now, granted, this is not a knock on the young ladies who have come through the Delaware State University equestrian program. But how it ties into the football program, follow me closely. When Dr. Harry Williams took over in 2009, he wanted to do away with the equestrian program because he did not see the point of it. But thanks to this landmark legislation that we are celebrating 50 years of its greatness called Title IX, the Delaware State women's equestrian team sued the university under Title IX protections. And to keep that lawsuit from dragging, a lawyer for DSU came to the idea that, hey, why don't we just take some of these football scholarships and give them to the equestrian team? And that's what happened. So Delaware State, and mind y'all, you have to have a minimum of, I think the most you can have anyway is 63 scholarships for FCS 1AA. So DSU has been playing with 50 or 60 scholarships for the last 10, 12 years. Ironically, or not so ironically, they have not had a winning season since 2012 when that agreement, when that court date, that lawsuit was settled out of court. So we are talking about a Division I program in name only. This is a Division II program on the field when it comes to the talent you can get, when it comes to the look of the stadium. Everything is just Division II about the Delaware State football program. That's why they haven't been any good for the last decade. And while no one seems to want to address that little elephant in the room, the problem I have is the people complaining didn't really start complaining until no one understood why, the Delaware State football program had suddenly fallen on hard times. But instead of once that information was made public about, the Title IX lawsuit, no one got the bright idea to say, maybe we should sort of form a coalition here or a fundraiser to get these scholarships, these 12, 13 scholarships that we lost, so we can get some more talented players so that we can stop going 5-6 every year. No one seems to have come to that notion as of yet, but Delaware State always wants to do things the hard way. And complaining about UD, granted, UD is the darling in the state. University of Delaware is the darling in the state. That hasn't changed in the last 60, 70 years. It's not going to change in the 60, 70 years going forward. That's what it is. University of Delaware has the media. They have the legislation. They have the fan base, the culture. They've got everything on their side. Delaware State is just existing to exist, and that doesn't help anybody. And granted, I feel bad for the young men playing because they trying so hard. I mean, it's not like, these guys are just like going out there just, lollygagging and half stepping. I mean, they just aren't, comparing to North Carolina Central or Howard or Morgan State or even Bowie State, which is strange enough. But I just want people to stop, complaining without offering any solutions, because if you're watching this and listening to this, I've told you what's happening. I've told you what has happened in the last 10, 12 years. Somebody's got to step up and say, hey, we can change this. And until somebody does, then you're going to see Delaware State lose to Bowie State. You're going to see them get their doors blown off by like Navy and Miami of Ohio the next couple of weeks. Help the program. That's all I'm just going to say. Help the program. If you're complaining, you should be actively doing something to solve the issue, because the squeaky wheel does get the grease. But if you just squeaking the squeak, what's the point? And that's all I got to say. Thank you, brother. Thank you, Pastor Marshall, for giving me the time today. Amen. Hallelujah.
No problem, man. That was a really good sermon. Delaware State is a program that not a lot of people within our space talk about, because they really haven't availed themselves in a myriad of ways to make themselves be a program that should be, I guess, noticed among the Howards, Jackson States, Florida A&Ms, North Carolina Central, schools like that. And Chris kind of laid out why that is. Hopefully, Lee Hall will turn around like he did previously in the stops in the MEAC. But it seems like, according to Chris, it's going to be another long year in Dover.
Hey, look, there is one game that Delaware State is going to win this year. And we can come back to this on November 18th, and I will gladly eat a plate of crow. But Virginia Union University of Lynchburg feels like the only game they're going to win, and they are like the Bishop Sycamore of Black college football. So it's not even going to count. It's not even going to count. It doesn't count towards like the stats. It doesn't count towards the standings. So it's like, and again, no offense to that program or those kids or that staff, but anybody in NCAA, I'm talking because I know they've got dates with a SWAC school, a few CIAA schools, an SIA school here and there. Anybody in NCAA playing Virginia University and Lynchburg should be ashamed of themselves. And yes, I'm including Delaware State in that. They don't count towards anything. What good does it do your program to play a game that's pretty much an in-season scrimmage? But that I feel like that's the only game they're going to win this year, Delaware State, and that really saddens me. But as I said, in my little rant earlier, somebody's got to take the onus to step up in the alumni base or a donor and just say, hey, somebody, we can do better than this. Until somebody says that, they're not going to do better.
It's unfortunate, but like VUL, they're the team you play to feel good about yourself, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they are. They're the punching bag of college football right now. We're gonna move on from that and talk about the rest of the games in week 1. Had a historic matchup that happened last Saturday. Tennessee State traveled to Notre Dame to play the Fighting Irish. First time ever Notre Dame ever, number 1, played an FCS school, number 2, ever played at HBCU in football. And the outcome was as predicted. Notre Dame won what's called like 56-3. Yeah, 56-3. But it didn't feel like that much of a blowout. Tennessee State early on in the first quarter, they came to play. They actually scored first. They created a turnover. It looked like the game might be competitive. Then Sam Hartman and the rest of them boys like, nah, not today. A lot of touchdowns were scored. Tennessee State's offense never really got going after the first quarter, and Notre Dame just wiped them out. So, Chris, your thoughts on that one?
People are not going to like what I'm going to say here, but Eddie George should be encouraged because that Notre Dame team, by the time we get around to Thanksgiving, should be a playoff team. I feel like that's a playoff team. I really do. An FBS playoff team. I really do. So when you can score first on an FBS playoff team, create some turnovers, and give yourself a fighting chance until that talent eventually takes over, it's like whom shall you fear? Because there's nobody in the Ohio Valley Big South Alliance that compares to Notre Dame. So there's no shame in that. 56-3. Shucks. 56-3 would happen to like Delaware or Richmond or another FCS program like Georgia Southern. No, Georgia Southern isn't FCS anymore. I'm sorry, but any of the FCS powerhouses probably go to Notre Dame and get handled by that much. So it's not. It was a nice. It's a history making event. And it doesn't spell the end of their season. They'll be fine. I feel like Tennessee State will be fine. They'll pick in the middle of that, alliance to finish 4th or 5th, I think. But it wouldn't surprise me if they won the whole thing. So, 56-3 doesn't look good, but Eddie George shouldn't be ashamed, and neither should his players. That's Notre Dame, but they'll be fine.
Yeah, Marcus Freeman today actually said, like, he thought Tennessee State was actually better than they thought they were. Like, he looked at the film, he was like, whoa, these guys are actually good. So, that could be coach speak, whatever, like just to get pound on the head, say, hey, nice try, but move on to the next game. But like Marcus Freeman was genuine in his comments about like Tennessee State's football program, saying like the team was like actually better than we thought they were going to be. So that's kind of like high praise from a really good team that does have those college football playoff aspirations. Jarrett, you saw the game. What do you make of like Tennessee State's effort against one of the better teams in the country?
Well, it's about what you would think from a coach that said we're not just going to go in there and just get rolled over. They were going to compete. That's what they did. They competed, And this is a team in Tennessee State. They've been through a lot leading into this game. Kayvon Pope, the awakening of that story that he was gone from the team. You go in there without your best defender. You had your leading rusher from last year, Devon Starling, who transferred in the offseason. They went out there and they were out there throwing their bodies around. They were out there trying to make plays. The result was what it was. It's Notre Dame. Like a decade ago, this team was playing for a national championship. So we should not be surprised that they lost. But they went out there and they competed. They put their names on the map. And there's going to be 1 or 2 players from that team who is going to get some HBCU Legacy Bowl consideration. They're going to get some, the off-season, postseason bowl experience. They're going to get that. They're going to get the pre-draft looks because of how hard they played. You know, that's what this game was all about. It was about the historic moment of Notre Dame playing at HBCU for the first time, and it was about these players improving their draft stock. And I think that mission was accomplished. So props to them for, you know, going in there and competing and playing hard. But mission was accomplished, whether we won or lost. They won or lost. I say they, like I'm a part of it.
Yeah, speaking of Tennessee State, like, do you guys think this is like a prove-it year for Eddie George? This is year 3 for him. They haven't been competitive outside of the first season and nearly beating Eastern Washington open the season last year. What is a good season for them this year under Eddie George, you think?
For me, I would say, you got to finish in the top half of that OVC Big South Alliance. You do that, and I think what people don't understand about amateur sports, I'm talking high school and college now, you don't know what you have from a class until that class reaches maturity. Like if you're talking about firing coaches after 3 years, then you're starting back at square one again, because now you've got to get a new coach in and get a new recruiting class. You need 4 years of cycling out previous coaches' recruiting classes and cycling in the new coaches' recruiting class to find out what you've got at all levels. And if Tennessee State is going to give up on Eddie George after 3 years, granted, we've talked about NFL guys jumping the line to, use HBCUs Deion Sanders as a stepping stone to the next level. But Eddie George, he doesn't need, quote, to be the PC. He doesn't need this stuff. He did this out of the goodness of his heart. He's like, yo, I played for the Titans for the bulk of my NFL career. I'm a Nashville guy. I believe in HBCUs. I want to give this a shot. And Tennessee State hasn't been going great guns prior to Eddie George getting there. So what could it hurt to give Eddie George a full 4 years, 5 or 6, to see if he can turn this around? Because there are going to be kids that look at this and say, hey, Eddie George, he played in the Super Bowl. He was one of the best running backs of his era. And he's coaching at an HBCU. I want to get that kind of coaching. So I don't think that, this should be a make or break year for him, but it probably is. But if they can finish 7-4-ish, 8-3-ish, be on the cusp of making the playoffs, then I think that's a good year for them. Anything less than that, then they're probably going to start whispering, and I don't think that's fair, but that's probably just the reality of it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think like Eddie George, he's learning on the job, obviously. He's never coached before at this level, but he's committed to like turning around Tennessee State. He's going about it in a more cerebral way than maybe some other coaches in his position would go about it, considering the status and what he means to Nashville. But I think like Eddie George deserves way more rope than anybody probably thinks should have, just because of those factors. Like we expect like teams to turn around in 2 or 3 years, especially with a big name guy coming in, but it doesn't always work out that way in college sports. So I think Eddie George, I would say if he can finish in the middle of the pack and be competitive in the Ohio Valley Conference, I think it'll be a good base for them to move forward the next 2 or 3 years. Next up, it's an interesting game. I picked out in our pre-show meeting Hampton and Grambling. Now, last week, as you guys know, I made some comments about Grambling's quarterback situation that didn't sit well with Ken Rashad, who's not with us tonight. Ken is probably watching along, but I was skeptical of who the quarterback was going to be. Ken said it was going to be Miles Crowley. It was Miles Crowley, and lo and behold, Miles Crowley had himself a game against Hampton in a losing effort. I want to apologize to Ken for not believing in Miles Crowley, but Miles Crowley, transferred from Alabama State. Didn't get a long look there for the Hornets. Comes to Grambling under the quarterback guru, Hugh Jackson, and throws on the 300 yards, a couple touchdowns, has Grambling offense moving. Unfortunately, they lose to Hampton, who, by the way, is in the CAA along with North Carolina A&T. It's going to be a tough role for them in that conference. But that was a pretty good game. Fellas, what do you make of how that game ended up playing out at the end?
I think, maybe Hampton is better than we're giving them credit for, but also at the same time, I also feel like Grambling is going to make some noise in the SWAC West. Like Southern, they're already behind the 8 ball because their offense either didn't show up or was forced not to show up this past weekend thanks to Alabama State. Prairie View's already won their rivalry game with Texas Southern. Alcorn State, couldn't, shut up Mississippi, Southern Mississippi, even though we wanted them to badly. Oh my God, I really hoped Alcorn would have won that game. But that West Division is going to be tough, and I still think Grambling is going to have a say in it because now that Hugh Jackson's had a full off season to integrate his guys, integrate his culture and beliefs into that program, they'll be. I think they can challenge. It's just a matter of if that defense can shore itself up. I mean, granted, you've got the preseason defensive player of the year, Sundiata Anderson. If the guys around him can come up, I mean, you're not going to come up to this kid's level because he's 6'4", 240. He's going to probably be one of the next guys drafted next spring from HBCU. But if they can at least not have him be the whole effing show, word to Rob Van Dam, then I think that's a defense that could, that whole team, that defense can just catch up. They'll be fine. So, in Hampton, yeah, like you said, the Colonial, it's the Coastal now, but the Coastal now is no joke. But I think, them and A&T, they won't be bottom feeders. They'll just be mid-pack until they can, do some recruiting. But big win for Hampton, but I feel like Grambling is going to be fine in the long run.
Yeah, I talked about this in my my takeaways article, which is on the website. Hampton is quietly 14-2 against HBCUs since they left the MEAC, which makes me question what would they be doing if they were in the MEAC? You know what I mean? I think they have some playmakers that I'm not sure how well they'll do in the CAA this season. They didn't fare well last season in the CAA. Haven't really fared well at all since they've left the MEAC. Haven't had a winning season since their 2018 season, where they technically were in the MEAC, but they weren't in the MEAC, which was weird. But anyway, Hampton is a team with some talented players. They have the linebacker Quayshawn Townsend. Their quarterback was making plays all game. I think they can be much better, going forward if you give them some time. But Grambling State, as Chris said, this is a team that is in a competitive SWAC West, and they still have a long way to go. They have the confidence, they have the energy. If you look at the early minutes of that game, on both sides of the ball, they were as energetic and as confident as a team could be. That all the pictures of them by cars and posing in front of planes, that confidence made its way to the field. They were just on a playing against a Hampton team that was prepared, but I like the prospects of them being in that mix in that SWAC West, and we'll probably get into the other games from the SWAC West, but that I think they're going to be up there. They're definitely going to be up there.
Yeah, great lead in, Jarrett. I want to talk about this Southern Alabama State game, a defensive struggle. These teams hadn't played each other in a while before Saturday. Alabama State, enough defense and enough offense to win that game. Now, the storyline following this game is the play of Harold Blood, the quarterback for Southern. He didn't have a very good game his first time out, just $160 in total yards, a touchdown and 2 picks. He did rush for 22 yards, 8 carries, but there's some concern down in Baton Rouge about who their quarterback is going to be. Noah Bodden, who actually transferred from Grambling to Southern, saw a little bit of action, threw 1 pass, but that was it. Do you guys think Southern, who played for the championship in the SWAC last year, can repeat with them, or do they have enough time in their schedule to kind of make up for this loss to Alabama State?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jarrett.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, let me say this was not a knock on Southern. I've been on Alabama State's bandwagon, and I'm supposed to be neutral. I'm supposed to be biased, but you can't help but root for Alabama State. That defense was lethal last season, and they were lethal in this game. 4 forced turnovers in the second half against Southern. That unheard of. That team is full of playmakers, and you would think losing Keenan Isaac, they lost another guy to the transfer portal. You would think with the guys that they lost that they would take a drop off. No, they ain't. They kept on ticking, and Coach Eddie, he had that team coached up. So this was not a knock on Southern. Do I think that they can win with Harold Blood at quarterback? It remains to be seen. If I were to venture a guess, I'd say yes. He can. They still have a very good team. That running game that he has behind him is very good. With Gary Crowells, and they just need some reps. That's all they need. That's all they need is some time together. They will figure it out. This is a very, very close division. This is a close division. So they will get it together by the time they get into their conference schedule. And yes, I do think that they can compete with Harold Blood as quarterback.
Yeah, I have to agree with Jarrett. I just don't see that. I mean, everybody that I mentioned in my previous statement, they have a chance, but the fact of the matter is Southern still has enough returning on both sides of the ball to where this could be a moot point. I mean, they have the talent, whether it's blood or body or a mixture of both, because I mean, we've seen that a lot of coaches these days really like this whole multiple quarterback formation, and for some schools it's successful. So whatever Eric Dooley decides to do, he'll probably end up pushing the right buttons in the long run. Whether that means they'll be able to beat the Eastern champion remains to be seen, because whether it's Florida A&M or Alabama State, because I still think Alabama State is going to give Florida A&M their best run in the SWAC East now that the Jackson State bugaboo is now firmly behind Florida A&M. But Southern still is the boss in that SWAC West. I mean, we could talk about Grambling, we could talk about Alcorn, we could talk about Prairie View. After that, I mean, you just got to take care of Pine Bluff, take care of Texas Southern. Yeah, they'll be fine.
And that's the next game I want to talk about. Prairie View, Texas Southern. The Tigers had a lead at the end until they didn't, and they were supposed to win the Labor Day Classic. It was supposed to springboard them on to bigger and better things, to finally get over that hump in the SWAC West, and it did not happen for them. Prairie View showed a lot of guts to come back and win that game in overtime. It's going to be a tale of two, I think, seasons. One for Prairie View, where they're going to have a lot of confidence off that win and compete in what we think is a wide open SWAC West. And then Texas Southern, they're going to have to prove it again. Like every year, like we think they're going to get over the hump. They're going to challenge for the division. And they have these setbacks, sometimes a stretch of the season, sometimes even within games like last Saturday. What do you guys' take on not only this game itself, but like the futures of both ball clubs moving forward? Starting with Chris.
Honestly, I didn't get that was the one game I didn't really keep track of. But I will say this, that it has been noted in previous years that Texas Southern is sort of like the Los Angeles Chargers of the Southwestern Athletic Conference. Like, you think they have the talent, you think they have the coaching, they have the potential, and then they just crumble to pieces at the worst possible time. So one game does not a season make. Yes, they're behind the 8 ball already. I mean, because that Prairie View game does count as a SWAC West game, so they are 0-1 in the SWAC West. So now you have to run a gauntlet that includes Southern, that includes Alcorn State, that includes Grambling. And if they can do that, God bless them. They'll have earned it, but that's going to be a hard mountain to climb. And I think for Prairie View under Bubba McDowell, that's going to be a confidence booster for them, because now that they can claim yet another victory over Texas Southern, now they can focus on the Alcorns, the Gramblings, the Southerns, and they can just, I won't say they'll show up and beat Pine Bluff, because Pine Bluff looked decent against Tulsa this past weekend. I don't want to take anything away from what Alonzo Hampton is trying to do with that program. I think, in a couple years, we'll be hearing from Arkansas Pine Bluff. Right now, it's just going to be, a matter of, keeping guys healthy and, figuring out what that program is going to do moving forward. But I feel like Prairie View, they can make it tough on, Southern, but it just remains to be seen how that will shake out.
Jarrett's shaking his head like
You didn't watch this game. I did. I watched this game. You would think that I was a Texas Southern alum, how upset I was at this game. So let me get into the positives first. That offense has some playmakers. I don't know if you've heard of Quay Davis, their wide receiver from Jackson, who transferred from Jackson State. That guy is a playmaker, and he is a godsend for Andrew Body. And that the running game with Ladarius Owens and Ja'Cory Howard, that offense is lethal, and they were ripping and running in that game. That looked like a team that could run the gauntlet in the SWAC West and win this game. Now, you're up 17 points. You're up 34-17. Two reasons why they lost this game. One, play calling. I don't know what they were doing, but they took too many unnecessary risks. Too many. Your two running backs are producing. They're getting you yards. They're moving you down the field. And for some reason, you decide to throw a pass that you didn't have to. You didn't have to. You're doing great on the ground. Run the clock. What have we not learned from the Super Bowl years ago? Run the ball. You have to lead. Run the ball. Run the clock. The clock is your friend. You take an unnecessary risk, Body throws a pick. They score. You throw another pick. They score. They kick a field goal. Now they're within 7. They get the ball back. They tie the game, and then we go to overtime, and you're not able to score. Then they kick the game-winning field goal. That's the first thing. The second thing, it's mental. Football is a mental game. They got too confident for their own good. They're out there talking trash to Prairie View. They're getting in guys' faces, and they're losing. They're getting so lost in this rivalry that they don't understand that this game is still going. There's still time on the clock, so you're still vulnerable. They lost their concentration. They were so lost in the glitz and the glamour, and they're scoring, they're making big plays, and they let the game get away from them here. That's what they need. When you got a team who, when their head coach took over, they were 0-11. Now people are giving you praise. Now people are saying, "Oh, this team is on the rise. This team is going to be this. This team is going to be that." You're getting so lost in that. And when you're up 17, you're feeling that like this is our time. Remember, they guaranteed that they were going to win. They're going to win the SWAC. They were like, "Watch this." It's SWAC Media Day. Watch this. They go out there and they start making plays. They lose concentration. They got to understand that the job is not finished until there's triple zeros on the clock. That's why they lost that game. And they can bounce back, but this was not a game that you can lose. They have lost 9 straight games in this rivalry. 9 straight. And this is a Prairie View team that was picked to finish 5th in the SWAC West. Not in the SWAC, in the SWAC West. And this was your first chance to prove to people that you are going to be a competitor in the SWAC, that you're finally ready to be a contender, and you let the game get away from you because you do not execute down the stretch, and you lose your mental in the middle of the game. I hope that they're able to get it back, and because they have the talent to do it. But this was not a good season opener for them at all.
Jarrett, some would say you have more fire and vigor than Texas Southern, the actual head coach, does with that rant you went on.
Oh man, and I can't. I wish I could be. I wish I could be a fly in the wall in any locker room to hear what they saying about their coach, because ain't no way that they're speaking positively about him after that game. Ain't no way.
Yeah, man. Clarence McKinney been on the job for a while, and I haven't seen him that enthusiastic like you were in those last 2 minutes there. Like, I think if they had that, they probably would have beat Prairie View and probably would be contending for the SWAC West title, but not right now. It seems not right now. It seems they still got a shot though. It's the SWAC West is open, as we mentioned before. Anything can happen in that division. Arkansas Pine Bluff won it a few years ago, so you never know. But it's going to be really tough for them to try to dig out this hole they dug for themselves after collapsing in week 1. And speaking of collapse, the Orange Blossom Classic was on Sunday. My alma mater, Jackson State, they took one on the chin to the Rattlers. The first 10 seconds of the game did not go well. Neither did the rest of the game either. Had misplays on special teams. The offense lost its mojo. The defense in the first half couldn't cover anybody for Florida A&M. They did rally in the second half. The only positive from the game was they shut out Florida A&M, which might be a concern for the Rattlers to not be able to score after building a 28-point lead in the first half. But yeah, like it seemed like for the last year, FAMU had to hear about how they were second-class citizens at JSU, that the Tigers were going to win by 40 points again on them, that after what JSU did at South Carolina State, they're like, FAMU was going to have the same done to them. And Florida A&M, they came out with bad intentions, and they proved to Jackson State that, hey, like, not only are they a different ball club than they were the previous years, but they're actually better than they are. And they kind of proved it on the field. So, Chris, I know you watched this game. What do you take away from the beatdown in Miami that Florida A&M administers to Jackson State?
Well, let's just say that even though 28-0 looked good, if I'm Willie Simmons, I am a little bit concerned that we were on 28-3 watch for a minute there, because it looked like Jackson State had a really good chance to get even closer, but a missed call in the fourth quarter. Yeah, it was only about 7 minutes left, but that fumble that was charged to Irv Mulligan was not a fumble. His knee was down. And so that is a failing of the SWAC officials, and I mean, there's a hashtag that we have among us in Delaware media circles that's called Stop Ref Abuse. So I'm not trying to abuse the refs, but I'm saying they missed that call. That hurt Jackson State, and that, saved Florida A&M's bacon. But that first half was good enough. When you take into account that a Bethune-Cookman transfer scored the opening touchdown, and Marcus Riley took that kickoff 96 yards, and that set the tone for the game. Like, Florida A&M was up, they were excited, and of course you have the bad snap on the field goal. You have Jason Brown fumbling a couple of possessions later. Game was over from that point forward because Florida A&M just literally imposed their will, and it's the first time that they've imposed their will against the Jackson State team in God knows how long, because Jackson State was beating them before Coach Prime got there. So now, you're not just talking about 59-3 or anything like that. You're just talking about Black college football history, modern Black college football history. Now Florida A&M has exercised that particular demon, and now they can look forward to the rest of their SWAC East schedule, which still isn't it's not a cupcake. We've talked about how good Alabama State's defense is. Alabama A&M didn't look bad against Vanderbilt. Bethune-Cookman is not going to just, roll over in that Florida Classic in November. So you can, we can pencil in FAMU as the favorite, but we can't make them the champions just yet, because this is still a team that has shown itself in recent years to be sidetracked. I mean, this past offseason, we had a music video full of Pooh Shiesty wannabes running through the Bragg Memorial Stadium locker room, and nobody seemed to think that there was a problem with that but the head coach. Like, the head coach is like, what are you guys doing? And everyone around him is like, oh, let the kids have their fun. Can they have their fun after they actually win the SWAC East and the SWAC championship? I mean, yeah, you want to make – the 1985 Bears, they waited until about week 12 or 13 to make the Super Bowl shuffle. You can't start making a Super Bowl shuffle in preseason. You got to wait until you actually play some games and realize how good you are to start making a Super Bowl shuffle. So FAMU still has some, things to work out, off the field. On the field, again, you build a 28-point lead, and you have, this great offense that you can either hand it off to guys, you can toss it out to guys in the flat. Jeremy Musa, and I'm not, trying to, take anything away from that young man because he conducted that offense masterfully on Sunday. But the overthrows are concerning. If he, as Jay Walker was saying on the broadcast, if he holds on to the ball just a split second longer, then those passes are hitting John Murray Sherritt and John Murray Sherritt. Yes, I think I'm saying it right. And all the other receivers in stride. It's probably 56-10. A couple of those passes getting stride is 56-10. But, Florida A&M is a good football team. They'll be, I don't know, what the rest of the season is going to hold for them, but I know that beating Jackson State was something that they had to do, not just for their SWAC and Celebration Bowl aspirations, but just for peace of mind. And now that peace of mind is a part of their, season, maybe this will give them the confidence and the focus to move forward and win the East and the entire conference.
Jarrett?
Man, this was literally their only conference loss since they've been in the SWAC. So, yeah, this was a hurdle that, they just had to get over. They looked incredible. One thing we're not talking about is their running game. They got some names in that running game. Terrell Jennings, Jaquez Yant from the transfer from Nebraska. He's a cheat code. That's a big back who has power, has speed, and going to Jackson State, I just think that, I'm guilty of this. So when I say we, I'm saying me. That we put a lot of stock into that MEAC SWAC Challenge win because it wasn't just a win. They looked good. They were energetic on defense, winning at the line of scrimmage. Jason Brown, who was efficient in this game as well, he just wasn't as good as last weekend. But that we put a lot of stock into that win, and they just didn't show up here. I don't know what happened. I don't know who's to blame, but those guys have to look in themselves in the mirror and say, this season is not over yet. The season's not over yet because there's a path. There's still a path. They have to stay the course. Going back to what I said about this is a mental game. Put that game to the side. And I'm pretty sure they're saying that. That was I forget which player said it. I think it was Seven McGee on the app formerly known as Twitter. He was like, this is just adversity. We're good. If they have that mentality, they go out there and they win out. They're gonna need some help. They're gonna need Alabama State. They're gonna need Southern. Who else did they play? I think they played Prairie View this year. They're gonna need one of them guys to beat Florida A&M. Stay the course. They went out, but this was an experience they needed. They needed to get punched in the mouth because they haven't been punched in the mouth, especially in the SWAC, in a long time. So this is the punch in the mouth they need. They need people saying, "Oh, see how they look now that they ain't got who? Now that all those guys are gone. See, I told you that's what we thought they were. Use that. This season is not over. They still have a path to the SWAC championship. And if they believe that, if they truly believe that, and they go out there and play like that's true, they will be in that SWAC championship game this year. But Florida A&M they were very impressive. They were very impressive, and also on the defensive end, they got some talent on that defense. That's as good a defense as you'll see from them. And I think they're primed for a run. I think, and this is gonna be historic if they're able to do it. It ain't too many teams that can say that they were SIAC champion, that were MEAC champion, and can say that they were SWAC champion. Ain't too many teams that got all three of them Infinity Stones. I'm scared that they're gonna want to go to the CIAA and get one. But I think they were impressive, and I can't wait to see what they do going forward.
Is FAMU inevitable? Kind of like how JSU was the last few years. It felt like JSU because of the talent and some of the guys that had on their team. Most of them played for Colorado on Saturday. They felt inevitable. Like, hey, no matter if it's Florida A&M, no matter if it's Alabama State, no matter if it's insert SWAC West School, that they were going to win because they just have better players than everybody else. Does FAMU kind of feel that way?
I don't know. I still feel like there's just something. I mean, I want to say that they're inevitable, but at the same time, there's just always been something that has stopped them from, you know, in the last couple of years that has stopped them from being who they are. Yes, the last couple of years that's been Jackson State, but there's still just something about this team that just feels like, okay, it's still a wait and see thing. Yes, they looked very good for 30 minutes. The second 30 minutes was kind of so. I mean, but granted, unless a absolute collapse happens, I still think that they'll end up winning the SWAC East. And even though I like Southern coming out of the West, I still don't think they're better than Florida A&M. So I think Florida A&M does make it to Atlanta.
I think Southern. I think Florida A&M, Alabama State decides who goes to the SWAC championship game. I think Alabama State. I don't think it's a lock that they'll beat Jackson State, but they will give Jackson State some go. And if they get out of that, whoever wins Florida A&M, Alabama State will go to the SWAC championship game. And you know what? Let me stop being scared. Whoever wins Alabama State versus Florida A&M will go to the SWAC championship game. I'm saying it right now. Whoever wins that game will go to the SWAC championship game.
But here's the monkey wrench, though. Alabama State plays at Jackson this year on Jackson State's homecoming. And you know how you feel about homecomings with Eddie Robinson Jr. He don't like them very much. But that game could decide Alabama State's fate too. I know that's down the road, but I don't know, man. Something tells me that the SWAC East isn't over just yet, just because of the outcome on Sunday. I don't think it's just quite decided yet. Florida A&M, as well as they played in the first half, and they have a lot of great talent on their team, they just don't seem inevitable like JSU did. Maybe if they had like Isaiah Lamb still on the team or Xavier Smith still on the team, and they played the way they played Sunday, I'd be like, yeah, like that team's not gonna lose. But I think maybe Alabama State can sneak up on them. I think maybe, possibly Alabama A&M, if they can get some play out of their quarterbacks, they'll probably sneak up on Florida A&M. I mean, because last year, even though the Bulldogs was not potent on offense, they gave Florida A&M a game in Tallahassee last year. It was a real game. So you never know what might happen in the SWAC East either. But FAMU's going to be the favorite. They should be the favorite. They have enough talent to win the division. But someone tells me it's going to come down to the last few weeks of the regular season before you find out who really is the SWAC East champion. And with that being said, we're going to look ahead to week 2. A lot of important games. The game on my radar is going to be Southern playing Jackson State. Both teams coming off a loss. This game could decide their seasons pretty much. The loser of this one or the winner of this one. Any games on you guys' radar for week 2 we should be thinking about?
Chris?
I'm gonna let Jarrett go ahead because I'm trying to figure out who I'm trying to pick for no game of the week.
Well, for me, I gotta go give some Division II some love real quick with Virginia Union and Shaw. Virginia Union coming off a win against Morehouse. Jada Byers was impressive against Morehouse, had 147 yards or something like that, but they made him work for it. They really made him work for it. And I think he will want to be much more sharp and much better against Shaw than he was against Morehouse. But Shaw is coming off of an obliteration against Benedict. Benedict is looking like a team that is going to be a Division II powerhouse for years to come. They just lost to that team. So they got to go against a Virginia Union team who hasn't been to the CIAA championship game since 2007 and are making strides to being that team this year. But Virginia Union they didn't show it in that Morehouse game that they're ready to be a CIAA championship team. They're going to want to prove that against Shaw. And Shaw has to show any signs that they want to compete in this game. So I think this is a gut check game for both teams. I think this is a litmus test for both. That show me any signs that you're ready to take that next step. I think Shaw, they have some very good defensive backs. They have the running back Sidney Gibbs, Andre Brandon Jr. They had the quarterback who got hurt in the game. I'm not sure if Shaw has given an update on his condition yet, if he's going to be ready for this game. But, I think this is a gut check for both teams. If we're talking about Division I, you already know North Carolina Central, North Carolina A&T. North Carolina Central, they snapped the losing streak against A&T last season. Davius Richard, arguably the front runner for the Black College Football Player of the Year award. Many people predicted preseason was going to win it. They're trying to get back to Celebration Bowl, and they're going against the A&T team who has had some turnover in the offseason. They lost their leading rusher, Bashal Tootin, two of their best linebackers, Taquan King and Jacob Roberts, are now in the FBS ranks. So they're a much different team, but the rivalry is still the rivalry, and that both teams want to win. A&T does not want to give Central 2 straight. They don't want to give them 2 straight. So they are going to fight hard. Both teams are going to compete, but I don't know, man. That Central offense with Mookie Collier, Devin Smith. Excuse me, my bad. Devin Smith. That they're just loaded. And I just think that they're going to be too tough to deal with for A&T. But that's why we play the games. And I think that's going to be a rough and rugged and hard hitting game, and I'm excited.
All right, I got my pick, and it's coming from Division II too. It is going to be Tuskegee versus Kentucky State. Kentucky State looked really good against, granted, Clark Atlanta was 2-9 last year, so take that for what it's worth. But Kentucky State looked really good in Felton Huggins Jr.'s debut. They have moved from a rushing offense to a spread offense under new quarterback Christian Perez, who looked really good, threw for about 200 yards, ran for 100. So when you have a dual threat, that automatically makes your offense a little more, unpredictable, which could throw off the Tuskegee defense. And Tuskegee already has faced a very good offense in Fort Valley State and survived that particular test in the Red Tails Classic. So I think this is a chance for Tuskegee to put some distance between themselves and the rest of the SIAC, excuse me. And I feel like this is a chance for Kentucky State to prove himself that it's not the same old Kentucky State. So that's my pick for Division II this week. I feel like that's going to be a game that tells us if Tuskegee is the real deal under new head coach Aaron James, or if Kentucky State is ready to make it a new sheriff in town situation. Granted, I don't think anybody has anything for Benedict this year. Granted, they just took Shaw to the woodshed. There's literally no two ways about it. 52-0 is 52-0. I don't care if it's, I don't care if it is Virginia University of Lynchburg, 52 points is 52 points. So but it's going to be interesting to see who can sidle up alongside Benedict and make this SIAC season a little more interesting. If it's Tuskegee, that could be an interesting championship game. If it's Kentucky State or someone else, that would be interesting as well. So I feel like that's going to be a game that will tell us a lot about the rest of the SIAC moving forward.
All right, cool. And there you have it, folks. Thanks for joining us for another HBCU Sports Podcast. We're going to try to do this every single week, for sure, once a week at least. The cast of characters might change from week to week, but we're going to stay committed to bringing you our takes and analysis on Black college football throughout the entire season. Be sure to read all of our stuff, Chris's stuff, my stuff, Jarrett's stuff, on our website. Follow us on social media. We're on Twitter X. We're on Facebook, Instagram. We do have Threads. So we'll be available for you, all those platforms. It was a pleasure, boys, tonight. A lot of great takes.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully we can do this again next week.
Yep, looking forward to it.
All right, peace out.